Shalom on Christ, y'all. We're finna get started here in a minute. Give me 1 second. Damn. Gonna get started here in a second, y'all. Just 1 sec. All right. All right. Shalom, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua Brakatah, Yahweh Shema Atam Hashem Yahushua. This is the Isupk. Started out at 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York, in 1969, under Commanding General Yohana. And we're here to teach the truth of the Bible to so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native American Indians are the real Israelites according to the scriptures. Of course, it being the Friday Hebrew class, we're going to be going over some more basic things today. Hold on, let me adjust the lights real quick because I'm getting pretty bad glare on the screen. I'll fix that. So what we've been going over the past few weeks is a little bit more basic things. And the reason why I say that is because, again, when we going over more basic, when we get more people that are coming into the school, going over more basic things is very important, especially when it comes to beginning that process of showing somebody the Lashawan Qadash and then getting to the point where they can then partake in the Sabbath service as a reader. Okay. So for what I like to do, and I've done this multiple times, one of the best ways to know that you're a good teacher is if you're able to duplicate yourself more or less, right? So what I've essentially done is starting with the ancient Paleo-Hebrew alphabet. We've learned this alphabet. We've seen it all the time. We wear our garments with the ancient Hebrew. But then with the Assyrian Hebrew, that's our reading Hebrew that we use during the Sabbath service. I would rather read in the Lashawan Qadash straight up. So eventually that'll be a goal, is to translate the entire Old Testament into the Paleo Hebrew, just as an alternative form of reading it. But it's something that's a little bit more accessible to everybody, because as we come back to our heritage, we don't want to try to make it seem like it's ever too hard to obtain the curriculum. You know what I'm saying? Applications that people use, like the Bible Hub app, the Interlinear Bible app, those are apps that a lot of people can get access to, and of course they're free. All you got to do is just have a Wi-Fi connection and download it to any Android or iOS device. And with that, you're going to actually see this Hebrew right here. Now, the difference between the ancient Hebrew and the Assyrian Hebrew is, of course, the fact that there's a couple extra characters that have variations that are used solely on the end of a phrase. Like if I give you an example, if I say the word mayam, which means water, right? Mayam in the Lashawan Qadash would just simply be ma, ya, and mayam. But in the Assyrian Hebrew, it's going to look a little bit different. You're actually going to have a character ma, and you got ya, and you got end ma. Right? and ma doesn't look the same. There's notice a difference. This is squared off or rectangled off, while this one has a little bit of a lip that hangs over. Okay, and so just keep an eye on certain things like that. And then, of course, as we start to get more practice with the language, we want to make sure not to mix them up too much, because again, knowing that some words may look similar to other words that are in the other form, we have to make sure to get each alphabet down pat as its own alphabet. Okay, so that's something that you want to try to avoid. Now, why do I say that? Because there's certain words that may somewhat look kind of similar. Like, say, for instance, ka right here kind of looks a little bit like pa, except one of them has a curved line, one of them has a straight line on the top and on the bottom. So you don't want to get them mixed up. Sa right here looks like I right here. Again, sa is supposed to look like this one right here in the ancient Hebrew. So we don't want to mix them up. However, it is important to learn them both at the same time. And that's really where the challenge comes into play, is where getting the repetition of seeing the characters, seeing them and knowing which ones are which, and then also knowing very quickly how to determine whether it's the ancient Hebrew or the modern Hebrew, or AKA Assyrian Hebrew, that gives you that lets you determine which one you're going to be using. Well, I will say this. When we use the Interlinear Hub or the Bible Hub app, or we go into the Strong's definitions of words, you're going to see the Assyrian. And the Assyrian is going to predate approximately 800 to 700 BC, when Israel had split and the kingdom had been brought, the northern kingdom had been brought into Assyrian captivity. That's where this Hebrew was established. And then the Hebrew that was superimposed back in the land of Israel with basically imported people from different areas, Assyria being one of them, but also some other civilizations moved into the land of Israel and then took our language and use it to this day. So there's a people that live in the land of Israel that don't originate from the land of Israel beyond 800 BC, which is still a long time that they've been there, but they're not the original people of the land, though they may claim that they are. So that's something that's very important to understand when you look at the geopolitical landscape of everything going on in the world right now, because there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of disagreements. I mean, for crying out loud, you see the disagreements going from tech gurus and billionaires. Everybody's kind of starting to, the social system is starting to run into a brick wall, so to speak, because as we get closer to these prophecies being unfolded, you're going to see more political upheaval. You're going to see a lot more disagreements between nations, peace treaties that are being broken, market turmoil when dealing with, market competition across different countries. And so all of those things add up to these prophecies unfolding. But the language of the true people of the Bible are these languages right here. And we do hold on to the Assyrian in the sense of that is what our culture uses, but know that this is not the original. This is going to be closer to the original as we can get. So again, you'll most likely see the ancient Hebrew on our personal items, our garments, our war scarves, headbands, basically our ephods, all of our apparel and certain things like that. Whereas the Hebrew is more of like the text-friendly lettering that's used because digitally it has an imprint across a lot of different applications and is easier to access. And so with that, that's obviously why you're going to see that. But you're going to notice too that Hebrew, the way that I have it written on the board, just so that we can make this perfectly clear, we're going to quickly go over what we went over last time. We mainly went over the Assyrian Hebrew. We didn't cover the ancient Hebrew nearly as much, but that's because the class was focused more on the ancient on the Assyrian Hebrew. So we have and then you have right here. Notice that they don't look really much the same. Okay, they don't. Ba, and then you have ba right here in the Assyrian. And this is just one of the things that you're gonna learn to overcome when learning in the school is that you actually have completely different alphabet there. Very rarely is it gonna look incredibly similar to the previous form Hebrew. Okay, so you just kind of have to understand that from the jump. Once you kind of get used to that, then it won't be as difficult to learn. Like Shah, for instance, that one actually looks similar to its ancient form. Da, it does not. All right, so you have da. So let's go ahead and write these down. So ba, ga, and da. Now, we've done classes before where we've gone over each character of the Assyrian, not the Assyrian, the ancient Hebrew, and have described what each hieroglyph actually means visually. And the reason why that's important is because that has more utility than the modern Hebrew or the Assyrian Hebrew. Whereas the ancient Hebrew actually can tell you things like cattle, house, camel, or horse, or door, or shield, if there's two of them put together. All these different characters mean certain things, right? Maybe perhaps we'll go over some of those today. Because those are foundational things to understand. So for those of you that come into the school and you're looking for a good Hebrew class to kind of get started with understanding why the Isupk uses the old school Hebrew without any vowels, and the way that we pronounce words the way that we do that doesn't sound like Yiddish or modern Hebrew, the reason why is because the language itself is more simple. And that's exactly how Israel has always been. We always try to make our languages simple. We try to shorten our words, we try to shorten our sentences, anything that we can do to get our point across as quick as possible. In fact, there's a there's a meme that goes around just in English, right? Where we have a phrase, we say, "You good?" Like if you're asking somebody, "You good?" It can mean so many different things, but the way that we say it can actually make it mean something completely different. Somebody says, "Hey man, let me borrow this amount of money. I got you next week." Okay. Oh yeah, you good? You good? You go ahead. Oh, I haven't worked enough. I can't pay you yet. And you reply with, "You good?" It's all good, right? And but if it's something else, like if somebody's sick and you're asking them, "You good?" The way that you say it makes it mean something else. And Hebrew does that too with its wording. And that's very important, because if you try to take the Hebrew translations completely literal every single time, you might have a harder time understanding the Bible. Our oppressor, who has more or less tried to teach us our own book over the past like 1,500 years, he's had his own way of trying to understand this teaching. 1,500 years, but more or less around 500 or 600 years, right? 1492, so about 500 years. And so he's been trying to show us a version of how he understands this text, which was stolen from us originally. So that's why it's important for us to get back to it, so that we can understand it in its purest form, look at it in its purest form from the perspective of the original Hebrews, the people that are waking up and coming back to their true heritage. There's really no way of getting around that. That's something that we have to actually do. So I want to actually start filling up the board here with some of that information with these Hebrew characters. And I want to leave that on the board here, at least until next class, so that we have a good reference. That way we can start going over vocabulary and certain things like that. We got Ka. I've been filling out the board here. As we see, Abba, Gada, Hawaza, Ha, Ta. We got Ya. We got Ka. All right, then we got La, Ma. We got Na, Sa. Got the character I. We got Pa, Taza, Kwa, Ra, Sha, and Tha. Now you'll notice I actually have this written. We always keep this on the board. This is here just to kind of kind of reintroduce it to you, because it's been right here the whole time. Every single class that's right there. It's one of those things where we want to make sure that it's there every single class, so that you can always refer to that if you have any confusion as to what each word sounds like, which one it goes to when you switch over to the other dialect or the other alphabet, and then of course how to pronounce it, right? So you got the whole alphabet. Aba, gada, hawa, za, khataya, kala, mana, sa, ipa, taza, kwa, ra, sha, tha. There are less characters in the Hebrew alphabet than there are in English, and that is for a reason, because even characters that you would think of as modern day vowels, for example, or I, for example, those are not actually vowels. So we might think of other words like V, I forget, on the top of my head, I can't even remember some of the other characters that are somewhat missing from the alphabet, but like Va and different things like that, they don't exist. They didn't exist in the time of the Shemitic, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. They didn't exist in the time of Abraham, at least in this alphabet here. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, as we go through the Hebrew, we want to make sure, again, that you have a good understanding as to which character means. So we'll go over that today, and that'll kind of more or less be what we're going to talk about today, and as far as covering the basics. Now, each one of these characters does have a meaning, okay? They all have an actual meaning. So let's take a look at what those meanings are. So, and when we talk about the actual pictorial meaning, it has to be the ancient Hebrew. It's not going to be the Assyrian Hebrew because those aren't actually based off of images. But means cattle. Food. Cattle, specifically cattle for food. So it means cattle. And that's exactly what that is. This is the head, more or less, of a cattle. If you're looking from above, you would see its horns go across like this, possibly a bull, or any kind of form like that. But this is what represents cattle right here. All right. The character Ba. Ba means house. House. And that's exactly what this is. When you draw a typical house, let's say you're in elementary school, you draw your first house, you might draw the house like that. And so this is actually not too far off from that. And of course, this is just a very simple thing. Houses didn't even look like that back then, but they may have looked more or less like a teepee, right? Thinking about a teepee, like a Native American teepee, right? You might have some post up sticks coming out the top, right? But then you also have the immediate area outside, which is the camping ground, where you might have a small fire that's going, right, to cook the food. It's the immediate camping site outside the house. So that's how I like to remember it. Ba is typically house. And the actual word for house in the Lashawan Qadash is bayath. Bayath means house. Bayath. Now going on to Ga. Ga looks just like this. And you'll notice that Ga does not go like that, okay? It specifically has almost the same shape as the cattle. It almost looks like you're drawing a 7, right? Basically, it looks like you're drawing a 7. Do not get that mixed up with Yah in the Assyrian. Yah in the Assyrian is, I believe, the only character in the whole entire Assyrian alphabet that hovers and is much smaller than all the other characters. So don't get that mixed up. Ga, completely different, whole different alphabet, normal size. All the characters in the Lashawan Qadash are the same size. It's like they're all capital letters. And you would even pronounce Hebrew in capital letters. In fact, it's almost an insult to even write or even type Hebrew when translated to English in lowercase letters. But people it just happens naturally because you type and stuff. But a lot of times you get in there, and when you're really getting in that zone of keeping your culture, you might just, even when a best example I can think of is Captain Mashak out of Isupk Washington. He speaks in all caps all the time. It's like his caps lock is never off. Even when he's talking in English, every single thing he says is all caps. Not cap like I'm extending the truth. What I'm saying is caps like in actual capitalized letters, big characters. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like a very masculine way of speaking. Hebrew is a simple form, is direct, it's to the point, it's very blunt, it's very Ebonic, so to speak, right? So we got Ga, which looks very similar to cattle, but it's not exactly cattle for food, it's camel. Beasts of burden can also be used in this. Beasts of burden. Camels are more so for things like transportation. Horses come into the same category. You understand? Gamal is the word for camel, actually. Gamal. So that's the word camel right there. Okay? A beast of burden. Trying to think of another one. Donkey is a beast of burden. Donkey is not. It's not necessarily. It kind of is a transportational food. Not food. A transportational animal. And more and kind of literally a workhorse in its own right. So camels, horses, donkeys. Those are the types of animals that would be considered some of these right here. Okay. While as you have cattle for food, slightly different. Kind of looks the same. It's even faced the other way. And we come over here to Da. We come to Da. Da means door. Da means a door. Now, if we were to think about that same example right here, where you have the house, right? Where the door maybe looks like a triangle. Well, the house looks like a triangle. And then the door looks like almost an extension of that, almost the same shape. Much like how a modern day house will have a square shape, and the door also has a square shape. It's just like it's symmetrical. You know what I mean? Like it just kind of goes with it. The door of a house is also a shield for the house because it is the entryway, or at least the pathway to enter and exit the building, right? There are multiple buildings. There's even multiple windows throughout a house. Like you might even loosely consider a window a door as well, right? Because it's like say the window is like it's like a door to the outside. Just visually, you could see through it, right? But Da means door. Okay. And it represents that part. Like if we were thinking about the TP situation, it would be the entrance to it. Now, when we use the character, I always bring this up when I go over Da because the character that's used in King David's name is Da, but there's two of them because King David's name is Dawadah. And I'm just making these lowercase so you can see where each character begins. Dawadah. The word Dawadah is abbreviated to show the shield of David, which is just two doors put together. This goes without saying, and we have to say this because how many times we see this on Instagram and TikTok in the comment section on videos is just, it's way out of hand at this point. This is 2025. The Isupk has been teaching the truth since 1969. And we know the truth about what this is. This is not a star. The scripture says that stars are circles. We're going by the scriptures. This is not a star. Stars are either the balls of gas in the sky in space or somebody on Earth who is considered what you would say somebody that's in high status in society, like a president, a king, a ruler of some sort, right? Now, the star, the shield or signet of David is what this represents. You can't say that King David was an idol of Israel. He was a king of Israel that the Most High appointed to be king over all of Israel. So there's no wickedness in that. I don't know how people always get that out of just looking at the shield of David. Now, one thing I will say is, again, because I have to be thorough with this, this is our alphabet right here. This is the alphabet that we did use in Assyria, but there are people that have taken this alphabet and ran with it and live in the land of Israel and also use this same symbol. Why is it that they use this symbol but don't use the old alphabet? Why is it that they use the symbol that represents King David's actual name in the original text, the original style and language, but don't acknowledge the Da like that? Well, they just kind of took it and ran with it. So they, they have it as the symbol of their country, right? But it doesn't mean that they're the original people, whether they understand that or not. Okay. So don't let that discourage you in any sort of way. If you're rocking the shield of David, it's a family crest. It's a representation that you come from the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that you belong to the lost 12 tribes of Israel, who were ordained to be under the jurisdiction of the tribe of Judah in that time. Okay. That Christ would reign over all of the earth, him from the seed of David. So to try to denounce the seed of David is important. To try to denounce Christ's lineage to King David physically through the flesh, according to the Bible, you're denying this. You're denying the lineage of Christ and the reason why he even came here. So don't get caught up in none of that stuff. Don't let any detractors try to tell you otherwise based off of what they think they learned while they were smoking a blunt and watching YouTube some damn way. Because they have not done the actual research. Because if you go anywhere where there are scholars that know about Hebrew, they're going to tell you that this is an older form of Hebrew than this. That's the truth. Now we got Ha. Ha. We'll keep this one simple. Let's see. Ha means to reveal. Ha means to reveal. And I kind of think of it kind of like when you're playing peekaboo with a kid and you got your arms like this, you come across like that, and you're like, peekaboo. I remember it like that because it's kind of like you're showing your hands, your fingers, right? At least 3 of them. And then you kind of doing this whole thing where you revealing to the kid playing peekaboo. But the Most High has 2 of these in his name, which is interesting because that just makes it even more visually representation of him being the creator and revealing the things that were revealed, revealing the things that were hidden. The fact that the Most High has his name is Yahweh, it says a lot. Okay. Now, in fact, coming along with the other part of his name is the Wah, right? Most High has a Wah in his name, which means to join or to fasten. This is a fastener. Join. That's exactly why it's so clever that King Dawada's name was written like this, because you have a fastener in between 2 doors. And so King David's name is almost like visually representation of 2 doors being fastened together, okay, to make that shield. And that's where you get King David's name, because you have the Wah, you have the 2 Das. The 2 Das are 2 doors. The Wah represents visually a fastener. Like if you think of, and going back to the teepee example, if this is your teepee, how are you keeping it from flying away in the wind? You got these little fasteners that you put, they're called stakes. We call them stakes nowadays. You put the stake in the ground and it has a function to it where it's able to go into the ground, but the top part isn't going to go through the hole that is used to pin the tent down. So that actual fastener is there for that reason. And in fact, every building that you're in is made of fasteners anyways, from bolts to screws to nails. Your cars are manufactured using many different variations of fasteners that join things together. You understand? You ever build a car? You ever take apart a car? You're going to need tools that can unloosen the thing that has been fastened. You understand? That's the fact. Zah. The character Zah means weapon. Let me draw it. Za means weapon. The first thing that comes to mind when you think of the character Za is either a sword or a scythe. A sword or a scythe, almost like a slashing motion, or even better yet, the scythe itself, right? A scythe may have one side that goes like that with the blade coming across and another blade coming across, right? And then, of course, that's been turned into almost a cartoony thing nowadays when they say things like death. And they say death carries a scythe. Well, weapons do bring forth death when used to that extent, right? So Za visually shows the representation of a weapon of sorts. Okay. Very loosely, the Assyrian can too, when you think about it, because it's kind of like almost like it's looking like an axe or something like that. But like I said, not all characters are consistent with that. All right, coming on to the next one, we got Ka. And Ka is the character in Hebrew that people don't like to pronounce the correct way. We say Ka, but don't get it mixed up with this Ka right here that is a little bit more closed off. Ka has a little bit more of a strength to it, like Ka, like you're getting ready to almost like gather up spit to spit out something, right? Ka, a little bit more to it. And it actually represents a wall, okay? It represents a wall. And it actually looks like one too. It means wall. Ka means wall. And that's what it looks like. Because when you look at a fence, like if you were to draw a fence, the fence is going to have different stakes, right? Every so often, every couple meters or so. And then you're going to have beams that go across the fence, right? Now, this is a wooden fence, right? But if you were doing a brick fence, you may have it come across like that, and then you'll have another one coming in like that, and you just got more bricks that you're putting in that create an entire structure, a solid, rigid structure, right? Kind of similar, right? The idea is to block off completely. To block off completely, and then at some point, wherever it is allowed, it'll be funneled in to a place where there'll be a gate or a door that'll let people go in and out of that location. The character Ta, hold on, Slacky, bear with me 1 second. Okay. The character Ta kind of looks like a target. But the character Ta can mean a couple of different things. The main thing that it represents may be like a plate. You know what I'm saying? A plate. When you look at a plate, this is pretty much what a plate looks like. And then more specifically, not to get it confused with this, but a lot of different times when you think of a plate, you have different portions of the plate. Like when you're eating a meal, let's say you're eating a meal, right? And then you got a little bit of food right here. You might got something else over here, some kind of veggies, and then you got something else right here, or a main course, some kind of protein on the side. So you actually have different sections there. You understand? So that's what the character Ta can mean. More specifically, if I'm going to be more specific, it also can mean vessel. Because plates are vessels. Bowls are vessels. Cups are vessels. You understand? Chalices, wine bottles, a little bit more specific, because they do deal with this shape a lot of the time, one way or another. Mainly because there's a circular motion that's used when you're creating pottery. If you're looking from the top, whenever you're making a plate, you're dealing with circles. You're taking the clay, it's on some sort of thing that's spinning, and then you flatten it out as it's creating the shape of the material, and it creates that vessel. Likewise, when you're making a pottery, any kind of pottery, you're using your hands on the spinning, basically a spinning group of material to shape and mold that pottery into a specific place. And so very common, I'm not going to say all the time, unless you're using some advanced ways of making it, of manufacturing, plates and vessels and things like that are related to this phrase right here, ta. Okay. And so what have we got so far? We have some very essential things for survival just from the first half or less than half of this alphabet, from food, shelter, transportation, protection, right, with the door. We got healing, revealing. We got fasteners, weapons, walls, and plates. These sound like the building blocks of creating a civilization. And the reason why I feel like that's so important, especially coming back to this Hebrew language, there may come a time where Israel is removed from our land, where we are held captive and are being brought into a land where the other Israelites are at. And whether or not we are given a language or not, we know one thing's for sure. This language here is a more universal, practical language because it visually represents a lot of the building blocks to building an entire civilization. So the ancient Paleo Hebrew is something that we should all be reverting to in the case where, say, we're all put into the wilderness, right? Say we get saved by Christ or saved by the chariots of the Most High in a time where America gets nuked or World War III breaks out. And these things are prophecy. You have to understand that these building blocks here are here for us to use as symbolism to come back to our culture. And so knowing these things, knowing what cattle is, knowing where the house is, knowing what plates and foods are and pottery and things like that is a way for people to communicate without speaking the same language, because it's easier to understand what it means when you look at it than to just try to say it over and over and try to get somebody to understand the language that you were forced to learn, whether it was English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, any of these other languages that are out there that Israel has been scattered amongst the nations and have been forced to learn over the past hundreds of years. None of them are going to be as efficient as the ancient Hebrew. And so this alphabet is so important for us to come back to because it serves as a civilization building foundational language that we can understand by looking at it. All right. Another thing. Now we're going to get into some more specifics. Yah, for example. Yah looks just like this, and it means arm. It means an arm, and that's really what it is. When you look at it, it actually looks like an appendage of sorts. It looks like you got your elbow here, you got your bicep area or your tricep area here. Looks like you got your bicep, tricep right here. You got your forearm right here, and then you're basically your ability to grab. So the arm kind of it means the entire part of your body. Okay, whereas ka. And I'm going straight into this one too because they're very tied together. Ka, which looks like this, represents the palm or hand. So just looking at that visualization there, a stick figure, which most people will understand as a human being, is going to have arms that come out and possibly even more specifically a hand of some sort, right? So these characters literally mean that. Now, of course, the only thing that's not on here is your thumb, but it looks like it actually has represented most of your fingers, whereas the arm is the whole arm itself, which actually makes sense that it's right next to each other in the alphabet as well, because you got your arm and your hand, whereas the arm coming in from this part of your arm right here, coming up with your forearm, and then of course these two more or less representing the rest of your hand without getting too complicated. Then they go and they make it a little bit more specific with this character Ka right here, which does visually represent a palm. If we got time, I'll go over a couple examples of some of the brothers' names in the school to better understand how some of the visualization comes into play when putting it all together. Okay. La. The character La means staff. And this one has withstood the test of time because it looks like a capital L. It looks exactly the same as it has for thousands of years. So Most High Christ for that. But what does it actually mean? It means staff. La means staff. Remember that for later, because there's other characters that we're going to need to go into as well. La means staff. Ma, which looks like this, means water. Now, when you draw water, you might draw it like this because water flows. So you're going to draw it like that. But a body of water is going to be closed off. This could mean a lake, it could mean an ocean, it could mean a pool, it can mean a lot of different things. But we know that it's basically just a big version of this, which is a body of water, okay? Body of water. If we just wrote the character like that, that may be a little bit harder for people to understand. So to have it, make it more simple, you got, boom, like that. It's very smart how they came up with that idea, that means water right there. Very similarly, one of the things that needs water to survive are seeds. And that's exactly what the character Na represents. Na represents a seed. Now, this is interesting too, because a seed, when you think about, like we were just describing, say this is the ground, right? This is just like if you were looking from from the side, we're able to see the under the ground, right? You're putting seeds in the ground. You would put those seeds in the ground somewhere, right? So this drawing, to make it a simple stroke, is just putting them in the ground almost like this. And so one of those is just basically, you got your seed under the ground. That's what the character means. Whereas you have the water and the body of water, you have the seed under the ground that also uses water to nourish it and to make it grow into a tree or a plant or any kind of thing that's needed that grows vegetation. Which is interesting too, because in order for life to exist on Earth, you have to have water, or at least the type of creatures that we are. You have to have water, you have to have vegetation, because that vegetation provides oxygen for the whole world. So these things work together to basically sustain the entire ecosystem that we live in. So very important things too, man. You got the staff. Staffs could also be represented as tools. So a staff, what's a modern day staff that we use, right? That looks like this. Well, we have that. A lot of us have that. Hopefully you don't have a woman that looks like that. A hoe. Because when you think about a hoe actually looks like an L, right? It might be upside down if it's like this when you're holding it. But when you normally have it, like you're picking it up, it's on the floor. You basically just look kind of like that because it goes across like that, where it has that sharp part that could be used to dig into the ground. Rakes, same thing. Rakes from the side profile look the same as a hoe. They just have a different shape from the front, where you got more prongs to help loosen up the gravel, loosen up the dirt, and then to put the plant, the water, the seed, and all these things together to get it to all come together. You understand? Give me 1 second here, y'all. Grab me 1 second. I just got to grab something from my car. So I'll take a second to write down what's on the board. Now we got Sa right here. Sa. Which looks kind of like, this actually looks kind of like an Asian character when you think of Japanese or Chinese. Some of the characters they kind of look like this. And that's not a coincidence, because the people of the tribes, or the nations of Moab and Ammon, they're actually from the seed of Shem, just like Ishmael is, because they come from the children of Lot. So that character Sa, what does it actually mean? It means support. Earlier, when we were talking about the wall, right? What does the wall look like? The wall has those beams that support the fence, and then you have the cross beams that sustain the structure, the rigidity of the structure. But one particular branch of that is going to be the support. Now, this is important because just like how a fastener, can join something to the ground, support is able to keep things put together. Like, say, for instance, you think of a weather-resistant pavilion, right, at a park, or just any major store, big store, mall, anything like that. When you see it first being constructed, the first things that go up are the support beams. First, the foundation is laid out, right? Level out the foundation. Then you start seeing the support beams go up first before anything else is added. It is the foundational structure for the rigidity of a building, you understand, or anything like that. As long as we could understand that, there are many different ways that buildings can be made with different types of support, okay? Different types of materials. We've experimented with wood over the years. We've used concrete. We've used metal. I seen a brother in the Isupk out there, deep East Texas. That brother's done an incredible work building a house made out of brick, using the same exact concept of building a home and having walls to the home and having it protected, not compromising to use weaker materials, but rather stronger materials, just straight up making a whole house out of damn near like concrete, you know what I'm saying? Brick with support beams all throughout to help join together the brick as it continues to be put together. And then before you know it, you have a very well supported building. The character I, it's pronounced like this. It looks like an eye. It represents your eye. Just like how you got a person. I don't know what's going on with this, but he's got eyes, right? And so that character I is a very easy way to recognize that, because our eyes are circular. Maybe not so much our eyelids and our eye structure, because it's a little bit more oval shape, but the actual eye itself, we know, is a sphere, okay? Pretty much like a sphere. Unless you're me and have some stigmatism and you got a little bit of trouble with some of that. You know what I mean? But that's the eye right there. That's what it is. Don't get all Egyptology on us too, talking about I understand and all this kind of goofy stuff. Don't do that. This is the truth. We don't talk like goof ass niggas, man. Pa represents mouth. And it literally looks like a mouth. Now, we've used these different examples. So if I were to draw a person, right, what have we talked about so far? Well, we know that basically like staff, which are, so basically is like the feet, right? Just from looking at it, it kind of represents that. Then you have the cap of yours. I'm facing it the other way because it's just going that way. But then you have the arm, where you got Yah, and you got Ka right here. So you got the hand specifically, then you got the whole arm right here. Then you got the eyes right here. That's this. Then you got the mouth right here. That's that. You understand? That's visually all of these things. We're putting it all together just to give you a basic understanding. This is why you go back thousands of years, people understand what was written on walls of caves and stuff like that because of very basic shapes. So we're keeping it real simple. And if you're trying to, let's say you're in a forest, right? If you're in a forest and you need to make sure that you don't get lost in that forest and there's a known spring where there's water, you want to try to make sure that people that are of your tribe are able to find that thing too without needing a map, right? Because we don't have, say for instance, we're in the wilderness, you ain't going to have a GPS. Your iPhone's not going to be something that you can charge. We're just being hypothetical, right? This is most likely the case. And so what you can do is you can put the character Ma on a tree facing the direction they need to walk to get to that spring water. You understand what I'm saying? See how the language itself is a utility, that this can be used and people will understand it very easily because they'll see that flow and they'll understand there's a body of water in this direction. So as you start getting closer to it and you're backtracking from the spring and you want to make sure your people know where to go, on the side of the tree that you would walk towards to get to that body of water, you would write this, you would carve this using some sharp tool of some sort, whether it be a rock, whether it be a knife. You would write that on there so that people can know where to go to find water. You understand? You would have a post in a field that notifies that there are seeds planted here. You see what I'm talking about? Utilize the language to the best of your ability. Use it in a way that can bring people together no matter what their language is. Right? That's how it starts. We can at least do that. We don't have to talk in complete sentences to get along with each other. And just the alphabet itself for the Hebrew is brotherhood. The whole entire alphabet is so that we can understand and work with each other. So the whole alphabet is brotherhood. And that should be the title of this class, honestly, because it's just showing you how well we could easily understand each other, even if we're coming from different corners of the earth, right? So moving forward, we got a couple left. We got Tazah, which looks like this. Now, Tazah is two things. Tazah, it means right hand or ambassador. And this is heavy too. We have a brother in the school named Tazayar, and his name literally means ambassador. But the Tazah itself does physically mean that, because a lot of times leaders in the nation of Israel will carry a staff, or there'll be an armor bearer of sorts. Right hand man would be somebody that would be considered an armor bearer also. An armor bearer is no different than when we are at camp and the person who is reading is holding the Bible, because the Bible is a weapon. You understand? And the weapon is in the hands of the person that's on the right hand. Right hand meaning next to them, not always literally meaning on the right side, but actually on this side right here. So it's saying right hand ambassador. This is somebody that's in a position of leadership, maybe not the highest level of leadership, but somebody that's associated with the highest ranked people. And so that's literally what that is. It's almost like this right here is representing the brother that's the reader at camp, or the brother that pulls the scripture to read to help with the speaker at camp. It also represents somebody who is physically holding the weapons of war for the archer or for the skilled swordsman during a battle. Say, for instance, just to give you an example, think of a movie like Gladiator, Troy, any of the old school ancient type of movies. Sometimes there'll be a massive battle that's starting to gather where you have thousands of people on each side, and there may be a general. The general might have a whole slurry of weapons that he can use, and he doesn't exactly want to use all of them at the same time for the sake of weight capacity, right? So he has an armor bearer that stands next to him, which is his right-hand man that holds his weapons for him. It's no different than when we're at camp and someone's holding a Bible, because the Bible is more powerful weapon than even those weapons of war like what we know as today. The white man uses that same mentality in his armies today. You have snipers, right? A sniper will be on a perch, and he'll have somebody right next to him with binoculars that also has his reserve ammo, that has other things that he needs, that has, ways to help him, a spotter of sorts, to help him figure where he needs to land his next shot, and can very easily track where the target's hidden, because he's not the one dealing with the recoil from the sniper rifle, right? Or another example, a javelin missile system. The javelin missile system is what has kept the Ukraine from being taken over by the Russians, because they usually are two people. It's not just one person carrying a javelin. You have somebody who's carrying the backup missiles that go with the javelin, carrying any extra equipment, where the actual operator is the one that is holding it. So no different than in the ancient times, where somebody would be on the battlefield and would be holding on to a backup sword. Maybe there's different size swords that the swordsman likes to use. He said, "Hey, let me get my dual swords," and he has them right there in his pouch. It's no different than when somebody even plays golf and they have a caddy that comes next to them. That caddy is carrying all their golf clubs because they don't use the 9-iron for every situation. Sometimes they got to use the putter. Sometimes they got to use the different drivers, right? The different tier drivers. So think about it like that. The ambassador is somebody that's at the right hand of the absolute leader. You understand? And in fact, the interesting thing about this is that this is essentially what the role of Christ is with the Most High. So don't think of it like as if because you're the ambassador that you're not important. Christ is important, but he's second to somebody. We know for sure, though, that the Most High is not represented with this symbol right here. But anybody under him can be represented by this symbol. You understand what I'm saying? I hope I've made that perfectly clear. Tazah is a really interesting character because it visually represents a leader of sorts that is assistant to somebody. Qua. Let me get that right quick. Qua. I just want to confirm this real quick. Qua actually means circle. Now, in the modern times, Qua does look like a circle. In the back in the day, and it looked like this for the sake of not being mixed up with Ta and I. But Qua definitely does look like, at the very least, a semicircle or a hemicircle, right? So it's got like half of it going on. It's a circle. I'm not gonna dwell on that too much, but yeah, circles are important for different things, for geometric shapes. In fact, what this kind of reminds me of is one of those stencil rulers that you use that you pivot, right? You pivot it and you could kind of tell, you can actually draw a circle if you pivot it in the middle and turn it all the way around. It's almost like kind of like this is mentioning the same thing. And in fact, Israel is known to be a very intuitive nation of people when it comes to using tools and things like that, using different tools to basically construct buildings, to map out and measure architecture and all these different things. So even though it's a circle, it also seems to be visually representing some of those things too, different tools and whatnot. Ra, the character Ra, which looks like this. And if you could guess, this actually does mean head. The actual, like the head, like just like how this is the cattle, that actually represents the head of a cattle. This represents the head of a camel. This particular phrase right here is not for any specific animal, but rather the actual head of something. Okay, an actual head of something. Shah means tooth. So let me rewrite that. Shah means tooth. That's pretty self-explanatory because if you got pa, right, and you got the eye, this is the tooth. It looks like Pac-Man. But you got the teeth right there. This is how you represent that this could be, like say, for instance, if you have a farm, an animal that is more prone to biting, you might want to put the symbol on their living quarters on the side, on the edge of the post of where they live at, so that it's known that they have sharp teeth, right? Dogs have sharp teeth. Certain animals, wolves have sharp teeth. So it could be a sign of danger as well. Just think about the Hebrew in a very clever way. You understand what I'm saying? Don't get it mixed up with ma. There's a reason why each particular stroke is important, because if you don't get all of it, you can very easily get mixed up with something else. But when you understand all of it, it's pretty simple. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Now we got tha. And tha kind of looks like a cross that's coming over, or like a tree that's falling over. Maybe not that long. Don't draw it like an X, right? Draw specifically with that stroke being longer than that one. And then you should be about as accurate as you need to be to make sure that nobody mixes it up with any other character. And the character Tha represents a sign or an end, which is fitting because it's the end of the alphabet as well. That's why it's the last character in the alphabet. But it also represents a sign. Okay, represents a sign. Don't get that mixed up with the Christian cross, because of course Christians, they're gonna draw that cross vertically like that, right? It's turned over like that. What time is it right now? Let's see what we got. Yeah, that's about the time that we got today for this class. I wanted to go over some more basic understandings of the Lashawan Qadash. We don't have to make it too complicated, but we've taken an hour or so to basically go over these concepts and have made a good impression on those that are new to this alphabet. Definitely try to lock in with us to get a photo of this. Practice the alphabet yourself. There's no better way of learning it than to practice it. And so with that, this is the Isupk. Started out at 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York in 1969 under commanding General Yohana. And again, we're here to teach the truth of the Bible to so-called Black, Hispanic, and Native American Indians are the real Israelites according to the scriptures. And with that, shalom.